Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to take a look at a very fun Pokemon for the single type cup, Perrserker. Perrserker is going to be able to beat the poisons, ghost, fairies and dragon types of this meta, so you are going to be able to Corebreak quite a few teams with it. It is however weak to the fighting, fire and ground types, so I've chosen to pair it with Machamp and Corebreaks. There isn't really a very good safe swap on this team, which is one of its main weaknesses, but I think Corebreaks is a pretty good safe swap. It is of course terrible if they counter swap an Umbreon onto it, but you can try and set up Machamp for a sweep in the end game if everything else goes wrong. What really makes this team work very well, and it did work very well for me, is that you have a good response to everything in the back, like everything they're gonna safe swap, because Machamp and Corebreaks make for such a good core, and you're gonna be able to win quite a few leads with Perrserker in the correct meta. Of course, always depends on what you're seeing a lot, and if you win the lead, you pretty much win every game from there, but if you lose the lead, you're still going to be able to win some games. So I did go quite positive with this team. Let's take a look at the battles. Going into the first game, we lead into a Muck. Very good lead for Perrserker. So we can just stay in, and they safe swap a Shadow Dragonair. This is not a good safe swap against the Perrserker because we do resist the Dragon Breath. It's not like an amazing matchup for Perrserker, but you can win every even shield scenario, especially when we're up a little bit of energy. So we can just shield these Aqua Tails, although Perrserker is quite frail, so it does take quite a bit of damage from these Dragon Breath. But because we will outpace, it takes 665 for the foul play / close combat, whereas it takes the equivalent of 6 and then 5.5 Shadow Claws for the Dragonair to get to its moves. So we can just shield these up, and then we can even overfarm by 1 because they had to expend 1 turn swapping into their Dragonair. So we can overfarm by 1, and because we have a good response to Muck in the back as well, we can just let our Perrserker go here, go for the close combat to lower our defense, so they're gonna get less energy on whatever they bring in, which is probably the Muck at this point. And then Corebreaks, even down energy, should be able to deal with this Muck, because one Dark Pulse is not really that threatening from a regular Muck. So we can just farm up, and then they try to catch on an Umbreon, so we bring in the Machamp, and they should be pretty clean sailing. Even if they have Psychic, you can live a Psychic if they haven't done enough fast move damage already before that. It does about 84%. So we can take the last resort. They don't have Psychic, luckily, and then go for the Cross Chop, and this takes out the Umbreon. And now, if we go for the Cross Chop here, a quite important detail, if we go for the Cross Chop, just do some chip damage, they might be able to farm us all the way down if they didn't throw immediately. So by not throwing and threatening the payback, we are forcing them to throw energy, so that way they can't come out with enough energy to threaten the Corebreaks. This is going to get a little bit close, because I thought a Shadow Ball would put them into a range where I could Shadow Claw them down, but they do live it a little bit comfortably, and they do make it to a Dark Pulse, but from a regular Muck, Corebreaks should be able to live it from this range, and then we can Shadow Claw them down, and that is a good game. Next game, lead into an Umbreon. Not a great lead, not a terrible lead, but yeah, the important thing here is you want the Umbreon to throw a move before you go for the close combat. So you see, we're just farming up energy and waiting for them to throw energy. They get to 100 energy before we do, so we can't just wait for them to go for the foul play, and then we go for the close combat afterwards. I'm okay with debuffing myself here, because I'm gonna shield the second foul play regardless. So it's okay to lower my defense at this point. And of course, we don't really want to bait with the foul play against an Umbreon. Then we can load up to right before they get to another one, and then go for the second close combat. This is not the greatest matchup for Perrserker, because they will be able to outpace, but they do let it go, and then they bring in a Muck, so we can't get this foul play off. I'm thinking that if I let the Muck farm me down, that would be quite uncomfortable, so I do aggro swap into Corebreaks, which is a little bit dangerous, because if they swap out and save it for a Machamp later, it would be quite bad. But they stay in and go for a Dark Pulse. We shield it up, because I'm thinking that if they're staying in, they might be weak to Corebreaks in the back. But it is Ninetales in the back. The Muck is almost dead, so I'm thinking they just have to shield everything at this point on their Ninetales, which is why I'm going for the Dark Pulse. And then go up to right before they get to the overheat. On 9, it takes 10 for the overheat. And then they just CMP time me with a Weather Ball. I think this is a pretty huge mistake by my opponent, because now they don't come out with a lot of energy, whereas if they had just taken this move and then overfarmed a lot more, they could have come out with closer to an overheat. Now we'll outpace to a Cross Chop before they get to an overheat, so they have to go for a Weather Ball, which is not going to take out my Machamp. I want to take as little fast move damage as possible here, because the Muck is dry, So I'm hoping I'm going to be able to fast move it down. This is going to be very close. And another quite important detail here. It might be very tempting to swap out, but it takes a turn to swap out. So if I stay in and go for these counters, I get 2 counters worth of energy in. But if I swap out, I'm gonna get less fast moves in. So I stay in and get in those 2 counters, and then we bring in the Perrserker afterwards, and they just about don't make it to a move, and we can farm them down. And that was a very close game. Next game, lead into Registeel. This is a good lead. They swap into a Primate, and I swap a little bit late into my Machamp. I should probably swap into Corebreaks. I think this was a misclick actually. But we can shield the first cross chop, and then we can go for this, because I was a little bit late, we can't farm them down, so we have to go for a cross chop on Machamp. But this is a little bit uncomfortable, because if I shield this, my Perrserker really doesn't do well against Registeel in the 0 shields, like with no shields. So this is like kind of bad, but I'm kind of hoping that they bring back in the Registeel here, which, yeah, probably not. Or I can just bring in my Corebreaks on the Registeel. They do bring back in the Registeel, so we can't go for this cross chop after 7. It takes the equivalent of 7.5 for the Registeel to get to move. So they are at it now. I don't think they want to gonna take another move. So we catch the second move onto Corebreaks, realizing they might be weak to Machamp in the back. So we save the cross chop, and then they bring in another fighter. And I think I make a bit of a mistake here going for the Shadow Ball, because they're obviously going to shield this. But they make it to a Rock Slide before we make it to the Shadow Ball, and they put us in perfect farm down range, so that we're not going to be able to get to another move potentially. This would be very nasty if they get this farm down, and they do, and they come out with a move. I can either bring the Perrserker in and like sacrifice it, or try to go for the CMP on Shadow Machamp. Go for the CMP, and the Machamp just wins that CMP, and now they should be 4 away. Can Perrserker make it to a move? No, we get to it on the CMP once again. And we lose this game, unfortunately, because of course a cross chop from a Machamp is going to take out the Perrserker. Next game, lead into a Shadow Machamp. I don't really like swapping in my Machamp onto a Machamp, so I swap into Corebreaks. It's just generally the safe swap. I generally found that Corebreaks was the better safe swap. You can try some different things. Also go for the Dark Pulse, because Perrserker is very frail, so it really can't take a Shadow Ball. Otherwise I would have been able to Shadow Claw them down. But then we can just let the Corebreaks go, bring in the Machamp afterwards to get a huge energy head start on Machamp, only taking 1 move. The opponent realizes that I'm going for the farm down, so they very wisely go for the close combat immediately to lower their defense, to give me as little farm as possible. But now we can outpace the other Machamp to a cross chop and grab the shield, and I realized they're probably quite weak to Machamp in the back. I can't let my Machamp go here, because I can't take the counters on Perrserker at all, so I have to shield my Machamp. And they go for the cross chop, but they catch it onto a double. And then I can't really stay in, because I think they're going to farm me down, so I have to swap into Perrserker. If I go for the foul play immediately here, that would be bad, because it doesn't take them out. If I let them get to the payback, that would almost take me out. So I think I have to go for the close combat on the CMP here to take out the double. Hope I can do enough fast move damage to the Machamp, but once again the opponent smartly realizing they have to take as little fast moves as possible, so they go for the move immediately. And now it's going to be a fast move down, and it's a simultaneous KO. Very close game. Next game, lead into Clefable. Good lead for Perrserker, although not amazing lead, because they do wall our charge moves. I also make a bit of a misplay here by going for the foul play. If you go for the close combat, you will be able to win all even shield scenarios. You of course let the first move go, but 2 foul plays plus the Shadow Claws is not quite enough in the 0 shields, where 2 close combats plus the Shadow Claws is enough to take out the Clefable in the 0 shields. As you can see here, the foul plays just isn't enough. So we have to shield up, whereas if we'd gone for close combat instead, we could have just taken out the Clefable. I'm not quite sure another foul play would be enough at this range, so I do go for the close combat, which might be a little bit overkill, but we do come out with a lot of energy still. What do they bring in? They bring in a Mudslap Dunfant, and I'm not sure which is better, to bring in Machamp or Corebreaks here, but I'm thinking that it's gonna take a lot of time for the Dunfant to get to anything other than a Body Slam when it's running Mudslap, because it's such a slow move. So I do bring in my Corebreaks. We grab the shield, and I know, because it was a fairy in the lead, it's probably another fairy type in the back. And Machamp in this 1-0 shield scenario is very, very strong. So I do just let this go, knowing that it could have been like a Heavy Slam or an Earthquake. I'm not really sure what you run on Mudslap Dunfant. They go for yet another Body Slam. We save the energy on Corebreaks, bring in Machamp to counter them down. and then they bring in a Coffee and you already know what's gonna happen here. We go straight for the payback, no shield remaining, and of course, one-shots the Coffee and that is a good game. Next game lead into a Shadow Grimer. This Pokemon is really annoying. You can win the 0 shields because you can live 1 Mud Bomb and get to 2 foul plays, but you actually lose the 1 shields here because they can live a foul play plus the Shadow Claws. But I like to go for the 2 shields because you take barely any damage from the poison jabs. They try to catch a move, but I waited a turn, so we save all the energy on Perrserker and then bring in Machamp onto this double. We can take 1 Body Slam on Machamp, it's not comfortable, and then we go up to right before they get to another Body Slam. Of course, takes 3 for the Body Slams for double, and then go for the Cross Chop to take out the double. And now they're probably going to bring back in the Grimer, but the Grimer should be quite low. I do go up to like as much energy as I can to try and threaten, like maybe they didn't count properly and think that I have a Rock Slide here. They do shield it and then I bring in Coffee because I've been seeing a lot of these things with teams when it's Grimer in the lead and then like a double or a Vigoroth. It's a lot of the times Umbreon in the back. So I saved my Perrserker with all this energy for the Umbreon, also because Coffee has a quite good matchup against Grimer, so we could definitely bring it in. Bring in the Perrserker on the Umbreon, go for the first close combat, we get to the second close combat before they even get to 1 move. They do have to shield at this point, so they do bring up the shield. Very nice recognition by my opponent to know that I was so close to another move that they had to throw in bad timing. But now it should be 3 for the next foul play, so we can go up to right before they get to another one. And they get off this next close combat, which will take out the Umbreon. And now, once again, very nice recognition by my opponent to throw the move immediately, knowing exactly how much energy I have. But this Grimer is just not going to be able to take out a Coffee so we make it to a Dark Pulse. And that, in 1 second, is a very good game. Got a little bit ahead of myself there. Next game, lead into a Machamp once again. Once again, we're going to swap into Coffee and this time, we're met with a Registeel, which indicates to me that they must be very weak to Coffee If this is their best response, they don't have a good this is not a good response to Coffee The Registeel can win the 2 shields, because 1 Zap Cannon plus the Lock-ons do add up, but yeah, Coffee does win the 0s and 1 shield here, so I don't think this is a good counter swap to Coffee We do make it to another Shadow Ball before they make it to another Zap Cannon, of course. We throw right before they get there, and then they go for another Zap Cannon. I'm thinking we can shield this and win the 1 shield, or because it was Machamp lead and Machamp is very frail, we can let the Coffee go, and they are switch locked, so we can bring in the Perrserker, shield once, and then farm them all the way down, come out with 2 close combats, and then the Machamp can't come into the Perrserker. So they're going to have to swap out here, otherwise I'm just going to be able to get to 2 close combats. So they do swap out into Machamp, so now we can't go for this close combat. This is going to do big damage to the Machamp. I don't want to take a counter when I'm defense dropped, so bring in my own Machamp, save the Perrserker, and now what do they have in the back? They're probably not going to bring in the Coffee they bring in a Clefable. This is not ideal. I'm thinking they're probably not going to shield because they do wall my moveset, but that was actually a bit of a silly thought because they also wall the moveset of Perrserker. So Rock Slide from Machamp is definitely the move they want to shield here, or the payback. So, but I got it on a CMP, which is pretty nice. So now they should be almost energy dry as we bring in the Perrserker. They try to catch on Registeel. It doesn't have any energy, so we can just farm them down, come out with 2 close combats. Go for the first one on Clefable. This is not quite going to take them out. But now we can just get to another close combat. And this is, of course, going to take out the Clefable. And that is a good game. Next game, lead into Lickitung. Every time I see a Lickitung, I'm just expecting the same team. And they do swap into a Surfetched. So we counter swap into Coffee They only got 2 counters head start, so we cannot paste them to 2 Dark Pulses before they get to 3 9 slashes. They go for the first one. Of course, don't want to shield the first one, just in case they get the buff or the boost. Go for the Dark Pulse right before they get to another one, and then we're gonna go for the CMP because they should be at back-to-back here. So we want to CMP in the first one, and then shield the Coffee and they should take out the Surfetched, and then they're probably gonna bring in the Lickitung afterwards to farm down. I know this strategy all too well, and I also know that they're probably, after farming down my Coffee here, when they bring in the Lickitung, they're probably going to swap immediately. I could bring in the Surf Edge because I know it's a Machamp in the back. Or I could realize that they're going to swap out immediately. Because if they swap out, if I bring in Surf Edge and they swap out, and I swap out afterwards, I'm behind on energy, which would be a disaster. But if I bring in my Machamp immediately, and then they swap, then I am ahead on energy. So I bring in Machamp, and they bring in Machamp. So now we can get to this cross chop before they get to their cross chop. And now they can either go for their cross chop, and then I'm going to be able to farm them down, come out with a cross chop, or they're just going to have to let me farm them down, and then we simul KO, and I still have a shield on my Perrserker. So now we can just load up to back-to-back close combats. And one close combat is not enough to take out Lickitung, unfortunately. But we are going to be able to win CMP after this. And we also have a shield, so we can just go for this close combat. And this is, of course, going to... I'm getting ahead of myself way too much. Take out the Lickitung, and that is a good game. Next game, lead into a Corebreaks, very good lead. You do lose to 0 shields, but once again, they swap into a Machamp. And the safe way to play this, I mean, I go for the Shadow Ball because I'm going to be able to, like, if I go for the Dark Pulse, they're still going to be able to get to a Cross Chop plus a Payback before I get to 2 Dark Pulses. But, like, yeah, I can just shield the first Cross Chop. It's a very, very safe way of playing it. If I go for the Dark Pulse first and they no-shield it, for some reason, they would be able to win the 0 shields here, which would not be nice. So going for the Shadow Ball was just a bit of a safer play, I think. Then I bring back in the Corebreaks, we go for the Shadow Ball. They should almost take them out if they let it go, but they don't, which is a little bit surprising because I'm able to outpace to another Shadow Ball here, which... Once again, I thought this would take out the Corebreaks, but they live on 1 HP, and then they bring in a Primate, and we bring in Machamp, and this, like, they outpace because they swapped out first, and then they get to this cross chop, stab cross chop. They're both very frail, but Machamp does live it. We can't even take another counter for no real reason. That was a bit risky, actually, before we go for this cross chop, and the Corebreaks should be so low that we can just counter it down, and that is a good game. Next game, lead into another Corebreaks. Wonder what they have in the back. I've seen some YouTuber made some team with like some double counters in the back. Really annoying YouTuber. Don't know if you've heard of him. You should probably subscribe to him, even though he's really annoying. He's quite good at making teams. But they bring in a Vigoroth, we bring in Machamp, and we can just about not counter down this Vigoroth before they make it to another move. So we do have to get to this cross chop. If I shield here, they're going to bring in the Corebreaks. I might be able to make it to a Payback to grab their shield, but they're going to be able to come out with so much energy on their Corebreaks. I am expecting a fighting type in the back, so giving up switch is not nice. But they're going to be able to take out my Perrserker, I think, with their Corebreaks if they come out with enough energy. So I actually decide to let this go, bring in my own Corebreaks, because if I get ahead on energy with my Corebreaks, I should be able to take out their Corebreaks, which they're probably going to bring in, because they're not going to bring in the Machamp, of course, they're saving the Machamp for later. But getting this energy head start should give my Corebreaks the opportunity to take out their Corebreaks and also the Machamp in the back. Whereas if I had let the Corebreaks get that energy, I think that might have been a loose con. So we can just shield this and then outpace to another Shadow Ball, even though they're running Dark Pulse, and then go for it. I wait a turn and then I throw the Shadow Ball anyways. A bit of a mistake by me, actually a pretty huge mistake by me. But we go for the Shadow Ball into the Machamp, and then we can farm them down. They do have a move on their Corebreaks. I go up to the Dark Pulse and then I try to catch it on my Perrserker. They have to double up and go for the Shadow Ball here, and then a Dark Pulse afterwards. They can't make it to the double, so we get to this foul play on Berserker to take out the Corebreaks, and that is a good game. Next game lead into a Shadow Grandbull, good lead of course, and then once again, they're gonna swap into a Vigoroth. And as I say, you just have a response to every save swap with this team. And like if they save swap a poison type, which did happen to me once, you can just stay in most of the time. Once again, they get the defense board point on their Vigoroth against Shadow Machamp because they have a very good Vigoroth, so we can just about not counter them down. But this time around, I really want to keep switch advantage, so I do shield up my Machamp. It's a little bit unnice because the Grandbull will be able to get a little bit of energy. Also, we can't make it to the payback. We were 3 counters away. Now the Grandbull is 6 charms away from a potential close combat as we bring in the Perrserker immediately, because they're switch locked, and then they bring in a Mud Slap Marowak, and in the moment I did not know anything about this. Apparently it has Bone Club and Rock Slide, and Rock Slide is definitely the move you want to go for because it is more energy efficient, but I thought it was frail, so I go for the Dark Pulse here, thinking that it would just take out the Marowak, but it barely doesn't take out the Marowak. But that was actually really nice, because now we can just farm them down afterwards and come out with a Shadow Ball. Absolutely perfect. Definitely skilled and not lucky at all. It was very lucky. Then we get to the Shadow Ball against the Grandbull to grab the shield, and now we have the close combat on Perrserker to take out this Grandbull, of course, even though it is resisted. And that is a good game. Very spicy team by the opponent, but we took out the Charmer, which is always nice. Next game, lead into Clefable. This time, I've looked at the matchups on PvPoke, which I would always recommend if you don't know how a matchup plays out. So I'm gonna play it correct this time around. They do go for the Moonblast, which does quite a lot of damage, even though it is resisted. But now we can go for the first close combat. Takes 7 for the Moonblast and 6 for the Meteor Mash. They should be 1 away from the next one. So go for the CMP with the close combat. On the Clefable, they should take out the Clefable, because 2 close combats in the Zero Shield is the way you want to go. But then they bring in Corebreaks, and I have to stay in, because we can't get Machamp onto this, and then bring in Corebreaks down energy, which is not a good situation. But because we still have 2 shields, we will be able to do a lot of Shadow Claws damage onto this Corebreaks. Of course, we can't let our own Corebreaks go down yet, because we need to bring this Corebreaks lower. Go for the Dark Pulse right before they get to another one. It is 7666 for the Dark Pulses. So we of course still have to shield Corebreaks, and then we can go for yet another Dark Pulse right before they get to another one. But at this point, they will be able to get to a Dark Pulse on Corebreaks, but we have brought it low enough to where I think Machamp will be able to counter it down. And now it all comes down to, what do they have in the back? They had a Fairy in the lead, so I'm hoping Machamp can be good in the back. We bring in the Machamp, they swap into a Dunfant, but it has Mud Slap. I threw in pretty bad timing, not realizing that it had Mud Slap, but we get to this Cross Chop. Are they at the Body Slam? Not quite, so we can counter them down. Apparently the Dunfant with Mud Slap is just way too slow. Last game, we lead into another Lickitung, and once again, they swap into a Surface. Because we swap 1 fast move after them, we're only 1 fast move behind. We can go for the Shadow Balls, which is a little bit more safe, because if you go for the Dark Pulse, you do lose the Zero Shields, which is not nice. So if you're only 1 fast move behind, you can get to 2 Shadow Balls before they get to 3 Night Slashes, which is a little bit more safe. If you're 2 fast moves behind, you want to go Dark Pulse. Now we can shield up this move, and then we should be able to go for the Dark Pulse right before they get to another move. Did they go for the Leaf Blade there? That's a bit weird. Go for the Dark Pulse to take out the Surface. Once again, they're going to bring in the Lickitung to lick us all the way down. We do make it to a Dark Pulse. If I were them, I would bring in my Machamp to get an energy head start here. So I am also going to bring in my Machamp, expecting them to try and get an energy head start, which I don't want them to do. So bring in my own Machamp, and instead of them getting an energy head start, we get an energy head start, because their Lick hadn't registered yet. So they had to expend a turn, making the Lick register. And once again, we put them into a situation where they're either going to have to throw their move and let us farm them down, come out with a Cross Chop, or yeah, just concede the match, because that was definitely game over. GG. That was the last battle for today. And overall, I think Perrserker is definitely on the fun side. I won a lot of leads with it, and that meant that I had a lot of success with it, because the backline of Shadow Machamp and Corebreaks covers pretty much everything, and I was able to respond well to pretty much every save swap. So if you can find something that works very well in the lead, that's going to win a lot of leads, and then with this backline, I think you're going to have a lot of success with it. You do need something on the lead which can beat Corebreaks, because otherwise you would be way too weak to it, but I think that would be a very good strategy with this backline. Other than that, fun fact of the day, Perrserker beats all the fighters in the Zero Shields with 2 Shadow Claws advantage, simply because you outpace them, and 1 close combat is enough to take them out, including Haxorus, but not including Vigoroth and Double, unfortunately. They are too bulky. Other than that, if you like what you see, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.